All right, so now we are ready to mix. And this is going to be easy if you followed my tutorial so far of the composition part of it, because like I mentioned before, sound selection is a huge part of this. So if you're picking the right sounds where the frequencies don't necessarily fight with each other when you're composing, it's going to make this process a lot easier. There's this mixing tutorial I'm going to make as simple as possible. I'm not going to get into advanced tools or anything like that, because that's a whole other, it's such a deep rabbit hole that this mixing course, I mean, an actual mixing course that covers everything would be, its own monster, right? But I want to teach you a few, what I do to my tracks to get a great mix in relatively, a short amount of time. So, here we go. We have our, we bounced everything down so it wouldn't crackle. Normally this would still be, instruments and patterns and all of that, but we bounced this down so you didn't have to listen to crackling while we're doing the mixing process. Like I said, the recording software takes up some of my memory resources, so I didn't want the experience to be unpleasant. So there's different ways you can approach it. Maybe, if you are newer to this, it might be a good idea to organize all of these into frequency ranges. So you could go back to that element sheet and that mixing cheat sheet, and, like you could color code the low end, and start from the low and work your way up. You could do something like that. But I'm just going to go instrument by instrument because it's kind of, that sheet's kind of second nature to me, but I'll explain it and kind of refer back to the sheet as we go. So I'm just going to go from the top down. So we're going to start with the 808, and let's go ahead and give that a listen. And if you remember, we sidechained this while we were composing. So, you can go back to the module. If you didn't sidechain, meaning, the bass pulls back when the kick comes in, we sidechain just the low frequencies out of this 808 when the kick comes in. If you did not do that, go back to the module, and you could do it here in the mixing process. Just go back to, I think it's called sidechaining your 808 and kick or something like that, or your sub and kick. Just go back to that module and it will show you how. Let's go ahead and find the kick real quick, and we're going to play them together. Normally you want to mix these two playing at the same time. Hear that punch really good. That punch is also called a transient. So if you ever hear people talking about transients, they're talking about that pop, that that punch. That sounds pretty good. One thing we want to check is we want to make sure that these are right down the center. And a good trick to do that, I think I already did this when we composed the track, but a good trick to do that is this knob right here. This either spreads your mix out to be more stereo. Like, let me see if I can spread it out. Well, let me just solo this. It kind of sounds the same because we already set it to mono. But if you, this little knob right here, what is it called? It's called the stereo separation knob. Just left click, hold it, turn it all the way to the right, and you can see up in this little window right here that the stereo separation is 100% merged, which means it's in mono. Another great trick while you're mixing is listen to your track in mono. Your entire track. So if we were to change this master track right here, if we were to do the same thing to this knob, now the entire thing is in mono. And I'll show you what that sounds like real quick. But then we'll get back to the 808 and the kick. All right, let me get to a meaty part of the song. So that's in mono. And that's in stereo. So when you're mixing, if you switch it to, keep switching from mono to stereo, in mono, you'll be able to hear if the instruments are clear and easy to hear without having, if you pan them right and left, for example, and you're still curious if it's easy to hear in the mix, you can check the master and just put it to mono like that. But, okay, so we've got our 808 down the middle. The kick, let's listen to the kick. It's already down the middle. They're both already down the middle, and they're both already mixed, to tell you the truth. We added, if you remember, we added an effect to the bass called Sausage Fattener, I believe, during the tutorial. And what that does is it compresses it, and then there's another knob that'll saturate it. So compression is taking away the high dynamic range to pull everything, to make the signal flatter. And I know that probably sounded like, I don't know, jargon. Think of it this way. Sounds have things that are quiet and things that are loud, right? It pulls up those quiet parts and flattens out the loud parts so it sounds more even, and pulls everything to the front. So the sound is flat, easier to hear, but there's not that dynamic range, meaning there's not as much distance and volume between the quiet parts and the loud parts. I hope that makes sense. It flattens out the waveform. I could show you let me see if I have a waveform. So for example, this is really compressed. You can tell by the waveform. See how flat that is? If there was a high dynamic range, it would be all over the place. It'd be more like something like, actually they're all kind of flat. The piano, right? The piano, if you look at the waveform here, you can see that, you know, there's loud parts and quieter parts. But if it was if it was really compressed, it would look like a big square, because it's bringing up those low parts and then chopping off the top of those loud parts. Okay, but anyway, that's compression. And then there is saturation as well. Saturation adds a little bit of distortion to add something called harmonics, which is, if you know what octaves are, you know, you have a pitch, like if we go to the piano roll, for example. Let me bring it up real quick. We've got, like this note is G sharp. I think that's 4. Hold on, I have to look real close. Yeah, I'm working on my small screen. And then there's G sharp 5. So G sharp 4 is, let's say that's your root pitch. Our harmonic would be like G5 and G6 up the scale, right? But it'd be an octave above, so it'd be the same note. But you would hear some things in the higher frequencies coming out from that note. That's saturation. So when we were mixing our 808 earlier, we were kind of doing some mixing as we were composing. It's just kind of second nature to me now. I always do it that way. The 808 has it's compressed to hell. You can see how square it is, right? So it's bringing it forward, and then I think I did add a little bit of saturation on there, so there are some harmonics. All right, so let's hear that 808 and kick together. I don't think there's anything. Oh well, there's one thing I do want to do with this. So let's hear them together. Sounds great. There might be some high frequencies, and I've added to every mixer channel. I've added a visual EQ. So a visual EQ will show you what frequencies are being played as the notes being played. So the Fruity Parametric EQ2. It comes with FL Studio. Let me make it nice and big. And here's what our bass sound's doing. Let me play it real quick. You can see there's some things way up here in these high frequencies. And if you hover over, you can see what frequency is being used. So you may have to squint. I have to squint because I'm working on my small screen. But that's, I think, 63, 136, 254, 632, right? It's showing the entire frequency range. And if you remember from your cheat sheet, we mainly want this to live in the low end. And when we hit play again, you can see it's living in the low end. The main part of the sound is here. But we might want to cut off just the top range. You still want those, harmonics that I was talking about. They all live up here, right? We still want to keep some of that so it doesn't sound like a dead bass sound. But I'm going to get rid of the very top part. So cutting out the shine, the air, the sibilance, all of those types of things. So the way you can do that is I'm right-clicking on this number 7. And we're going to go type. And we're going to say, I think it's high pass. No, it's low pass. Sorry. I get those confused. Low pass. There we go. We're going to right click again, and the order is going to be steep 8. So that gives you a nice steep curve right here. And it's just taking up that very high end. And remember, this is right down the middle. So we definitely want to notch out where the singer is, which would be the 500 to 3K range, since we want to save all of that space for the lead vocal. So I'm just going to go here. As you can see, this is 1363, so 1.3K. And then this is 2.5. So in this range right here, I'm just going to notch this out. I don't want to get rid of all the sounds that the bass is playing up in this range, but I'm going to notch it down. Probably at about 2K or so. There we go. And that'll just make sure there's plenty of room for the vocal. And that's kind of the rule we're going to have for a lot of these instruments. So while this first one might seem complex, the rest of them are going to fall right into place. Same with the kick. We'll just look at the kick real quick. All right. Let's see what that's playing. You can see there's some high end here too. So type. We want to do low pass. And we're going to do order as steep. So we're cutting off the very high part there. And I'm going to notch it out here around the 2K range. There we go. That's all there is to it. So that's the kick and the bass. And let's move on to the next instrument. Hey, what's going on? I hope you've enjoyed this training. This training is just part of a larger course. So if you want to take the whole course, just go to this playlist right here. Also, if you subscribe to my channel, you're going to get a lot of information on how to get your music into TV and film. So if that's something that interests you, go ahead and subscribe, comment, like, all of those things. Let's go.